So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay. And today, unlike the last few battles which have focused on the Númenórean kingdoms to the south of Gondor and Angmar, which the last few certainly have, today we will be shifting our attention to the Númenóreans of the north, because today we're back on the Cardolan outpost for what is a very lore-friendly battle, I suppose. Even if it never quite happened, it's the sort of thing you could certainly believe if someone told you that it did. Because this is the Cardolan outpost, of course. It's pretty much the closest analogous to what we have for something for THARBAD in Reforged. I'm not sure if Dak has got a custom battle map for THARBAD, and I know that in reality it sits astride the river that it's near in a not dissimilar way to Osgiliath. Maybe a little bit less impressive than Osgiliath in its prime, but even so. It's the closest thing we have, and today we have a combination of the more good aligned kingdoms of Arnor in Arthedain and Cardolan defending what we will refer to as THARBAD for the time being, at least until potentially in the future there is actually a THARBAD that is added. I don't think there's any plans for such a thing yet, but maybe one day. And then we have 4 armies of the wild men of Rhudaur that are coming in to try and steal this city away from Cardolan, trying to bolster their own power. And of course they are going to be headed out by some Angmar forces as well, their Dark Master from Khan Doom pulling their strings. And speaking of which, we will go through the attacking armies first of all. The player who sent it to me is on the defending side of things, but we'll get onto his army in just a moment. We shall start off with the Trumpster, who's playing as Rhudaur. So Rhudaur, of course, a very interesting faction. They're definitely, in terms of the faction's play styles, they're actually one of the factions I do enjoy playing more than many others, because they do have the ability to deal an awful lot of damage very quickly, and they also have enough manpower to the point where if you lose a few men by, maybe some careless play, which I am most certainly very capable of, it's not the end of the world. You have the kind of disposable manpower that the orcs have, maybe not in quite the same quantities, but it's not too far away. But you also have more teeth to you than a lot of the orc factions have, or at least you have the ability to deal damage more quickly. But you are also fragile in a few ways as well. Rhudaur Swordsman, one of the useful units for Rhudaur, because while they're certainly not anything special individually, there are quite a lot of them, and they're not garbage by any means. Like, they're not on the same sort of low level as some of the really basic orc line infantry units. They are a little bit better than that. But even so, they're not going to win you any battles, but they will fill out your army to make it harder for you to lose said battles. Dunman Hunters are in here as well, so the lowest tier of Rhudaur Archer. This is probably, in this sort of matchup, this is probably what I would do, because in terms of a skirmish, you're not going to beat the mid-range punch of Cardolan's crossbows, and you're not going to be able to out-skirmish Arthedain at long range either. The way that you're going to win at range would be to close in, to use your javelins potentially, but considering this is a siege, you'll have to bide your time to do that, and the Dunman Hunters are a cheap archer that will allow you to do so. And that will of course allow you later on to use something like the Etten Troll Hunters here, heavily armoured by Rhudaur standards, spearmen as well, so they do have a bit of utility against cavalry units. But of course the main attraction is the fact that they deal that heavy AP damage with their javelins, will be very useful to wear down some of the elites of the defenders that they are going to be facing today. Rhudaur Axemen. Rhudaur, of course, are one of those factions that have got a lot of AP at their disposal, both with their javelins and in melee with units like the Rhudaur Axemen. And AP is going to be very useful against both Arthedain and Cardolan. Of the 3 petty kingdoms that Arnor broke into, Rhudaur are the least reliant on armour. So it follows, of course, that their AP that they also traffic in will be useful against their foes. Rhudaur Berserkers are in here as well, who are effectively a shock infantry unit. They share the distinction of being a shock infantry with a shield, with the Trollmen really. They're the only 2 units in the game that come to mind that really counters that. They also have that ranged attack as well, so they're a very multifaceted unit. They're not quite as good at being a pure melee unit as the other Rhudaur bodyguard, but they definitely have a bit of utility to them. There's Rhudaur Clansmen with the armour upgrade in there, very useful for absorbing a bit of punishment. There are Black Walls, one of the Berserker class units in the game, of course. Very, very nice for doing some damage, of course. When their hit points are gone though, much like the Uruk-hai Berserkers, they will fall away very, very quickly. So do watch out for that. Don't expect them to have infinite staying power. And that's pretty much it, to be honest with you. So he's gone for his heavier javelins. He may have some Trollshire axe throwers hidden in here as well. They're a unit that can hide anywhere after all. And I would definitely bring them against 2 factions that can traffic in quite a few cheaper pikemen. Definitely your best tool for dealing with them. We also have Y2K86 playing as the second of the Rhudaur armies. Again, Etten Troll Hunters on the front. I wouldn't send them in first because they would be an excellent target for Cardolan's crossbows, but we shall see what he does. He hasn't got the armour upgrade on his Rhudaur Clansmen either. But again, the shield will do most of the heavy lifting, to be fair, and they're not going to, while they are more aggressive than some other spears of a similar cost, they are at the end of the day still spears, so they're not going to be the primary damage dealers on the front line against some of the heavily armoured units they're going to be coming up against. But they will offer Rhudaur a bit more staying power. Rhudaur Swordsman once again to fill out his ranks. He's gone for some Rhudaur Marksmen, slightly stronger than the Dunman Hunters. They also have a lot more ammunition, but even so, you're still not really going to win any skirmish fights against Cardolan, or especially Arthedain, as Rhudaur. Have the Witch Realm Enslavers, the other bodyguard unit I was talking about, of course. That two-handed shock infantry with armour piercing, really, really strong if you can get them in and if they're supported. But of course, they don't have the same utility as the Berserkers. He's gone for the Arthedain Pikemen as well. I'm a big fan of these units. This unit, they always seem to perform really, really nicely. The fact they have a shield is a nice bonus as well, because it means that they're not quite as vulnerable to arrow fire as many pikes tend to be. And he's gone for a ballista as well, interestingly enough, manned by the goblins, the foul goblins that created these contraptions. But yeah, interesting choice. I mean, there is a river running through the length of the battlefield, so a ballista may not be the worst idea, and if there is defending artillery, you can snipe it out. So I think it's a good choice for someone at least to have brought something like that. We have the Steward of Dale playing as the Angmar army, heading up this assault, of course. They're the ones that really wear the trousers in this relationship, you have to say. Trolls of Gundabad offer you that really nice punch along with the Trolls of Angmar. You often see both of them brought to give that extra mass to their really aggressive attack. Angmar are really an all or nothing kind of faction. If they commit everything at once, they can be very difficult to stop. It will be interesting to see how he decides to go about things here. He's gone for some Warg Riders as well, just to give a bit of mobility. It is very possible, of course, that Arthedain especially could try and sally forth with some cavalry, make life a little bit more difficult in the more open areas of the map over on the other side of the river. So I can definitely see why he's gone for some Warg Riders here. He has gone for some Angmar Halberdiers as well. Cheap, phalanx, armour piercing, all good things, but of course, as far as Halberdiers go, they're certainly not at the sharp end of the food chain, so to speak. Blackwatch Legion, good pushing unit. I don't know how important pushing is going to be on this occasion, but it is always useful to have a unit like this, and of course their heavy armour and massive shield value also means that arrows aren't really going to bother them at all. Guardians of Cardolan, very similar in many ways, big shield value, nice armour, even without the armour upgraders that we see here with the rusted armour. They're still more than capable really of taking a lot of punishment at range and in melee. Not the most damaging line infantry unit, but definitely offers a nice contrast to the more lightly armoured Rhudaur forces they'll be fighting alongside. And also the Witch Realm Hammer Guard, which I do believe are stronger still than the Witch Realm Enslavers that Rhudaur have. Angmar's elite units do tend to be very, very scary indeed, and the Hammer Guard, of course, one of the better shock infantry units in the game as far as the General's Bodyguard go, and that is where the General is going to be today. And then the final of Rhudaur army, played by Lalan 1230. He's gone for some marksmen as well, so they will be firing for quite a long time in this battle, but again, they're not really going to win the battle for Rhudaur, it's just a stalling measure. Swordsman, he's gone for actually the cheaper option when it comes to pikes, the Dunman Pikeman, which I don't disagree with. All pikes can be very, very useful, as long as he doesn't commit them too soon, because of course they will get ripped apart, especially by Arthedain's archers, so he does need to be careful there. He's gone for some Enslavers, he's got some Rhudaur Axemen as well, so extra AP. Javelins and axe throwers back here with the Arthedain Berserkers and more Etenmore's Troll Hunters. This is quite a small army. I would imagine there's probably some hidden units around here. I would imagine there's certainly some Trollshore axe throwers in at least one or two of the Rhudaur armies, to be honest with you. But that is the attacking force today. Excuse me. And we will be moving on to the defenders, starting off with the player who sent me the battle replay, so big thank you to Tommy Wiseau. He's playing as one of the two Cardolan defenders as they act in defence of their city. Minhiriath archers, again, you can see the difference in armour that the Cardolan archers have in comparison to the Rhudaur ones. Going to be very capable at skirmishing over a long period of time with Rhudaur here. And crossing a river is going to be a punishing experience for them. There's really no avoiding that on this occasion, I don't think. They just need to sort of combine their forces and cross the river as aggressively as they can, because if they reach critical mass on the front line, Cardolan may start to struggle there. For example, with the Minhiriath Men-at-Arms, they're a very fine, standard line infantry unit, but if they're faced with all the AP that Rhudaur can bring to the field, they will struggle. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Cardolan's General, going to be the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, an excellent unit for buffing the morale of nearby units in quite a wide radius, and they're also very tanky, of course. Albeit they're not an exception, they're not a unit that will wow you all that much, they're just very dependable, which I think for Cardolan is fine to have their general in a unit like that. Greenway Garrison footmen, who are currently hiding, of course. They are the cheap pikes that Cardolan can bring. Very nice for holding the line in a situation like this. We can also see a very deadly unit, which is obviously going to come into its own here. It could also be the case that the Arthedain Rangers are hiding on the other side, but the Dunedain Rangers here for Cardolan, and presumably for Arthedain, are one of the best tools that you can use shooting right along these narrow bridges. The wider choke point down there may be less fertile ground, but still lots of potential across the field. The armour upgraded Minotaur Romen Guardians, arguably the best standard crossbow in the game, because the Blackwatch engineers, or the Blacklock engineers I should say, are a little bit different because they have body piercing, so there's nothing that you can really do to compete with that. And the Minotaur Romen Guardians are also not really a bodyguard unit, whereas you could say the Blacklocks are. But yeah, the Minotaur Roman Gatekeeper is really, really good crossbow. Halberds in melee as well is very nice. Dunedain Captains, a nice multiple HP heavy swordsman, which will do quite well against quite a lot of the lightly armoured Rhudaur forces. And here we have Men at Arms. He's got some Wardens of Tirn Gorthard over here, a nice unit of morale buffing pikes. You can see here the Dunedain Captains, you can bring 2 of them now, albeit they're kind of similar to the Knights of the Silver Swan in that regard, in the sense that they're not quite on the same level as the other heavy swordsmen, but the fact that you can bring 2 does mean that you effectively double up on multiple HP units, which can be very useful in the right sort of situation. This could be exactly that, considering they're facing Rhudaur. And that's going to be that. There's also THARBAD Warhammers back here, who of course are on the same sort of level as the other heavy-hitting AP shock infantry bodyguards, such as the ones they're going to be facing today in the Witch Realm Hammer Guard and the Witch Realm Enslavers. The second Cardolan army, played by Pimp, he's got some men-at-arms, he's got some civilians who have been bravely pushed to the front line. They're going to get ripped apart by pretty much any unit that comes their way. He's got some men-at-arms as well, just to help shore things up in the second line. More Greenway Garrison footmen to help things there. He's gone for 2 units of THARBAD Riders, which is an interesting choice. Very much a glass cannon-esque cavalry, but not so much in the sense that they will die super quickly like something like the Nandor Glade Riders. More the fact that Cardolan's low morale impacts them as well. So if you charge them into a situation that's even moderately against them, you will see their morale plummet pretty quickly, but with a charge bonus of 20, they are really one of the hidden gems of Cardolan's roster. If you can get some good charges off with them, they are just as effective at as knights at that. But of course they don't have the all-round strengths that knights have. Unupgraded Dunedain Captains over here, so he too has gone for more HP on the front line. Wardens of Tirn Gorthad back here, THARBAD Warhammers once again, so a lot of the two-handers here. Dunedain Rangers waiting, sharpshooters, so obviously the crossbows are here, and the Hearthguard of Amon Sul. And then finally, have the Arthedain army played by Mason Pekerns. He has got some Arthedain men-at-arms without the armour upgrade, interestingly enough, which you don't see that often, but they're still going to be obviously decently effective on the front line. They were never going to do too well against a lot of Rhudaur's AP anyway, so it just makes sense that they're just here to sort of get in the way. We have got some Arthedain marksmen over here, which again going to be useful for skirmishing. Arthedain pikemen do have the armour upgrade. I'd actually be less tempted to give them the armour upgrade because it's not going to save them from arrow fire, and if your pikes are getting engaged in close melee, it's already gone wrong for them. They do benefit from an armour upgrade, of course, but it just wouldn't be my first choice. I'd probably prefer to give it to certainly the marksmen because it gives them that extra edge in a skirmish. We have some dismounted Fornoster Knights, very nice heavy swordsmen. The high end of quality in terms of infantry is something Arthedain do a little bit better than Cardolan generally. Arthedain pikemen, Arthedain men-at-arms, a unit I'm a big fan of, the Dunedain Peacekeepers. They'd be really useful against a lot of Rhudaur's units because they are not heavily armoured to the same extent as the other Arthedain units are. They're Dunedain, so they have a little bit better skill, and the extra damage they do against the lightly armoured Rhudaur forces is going to be very useful. The same is true for the Fornoster Knights, to be fair, as well. More Peacekeepers. We've got some Arthedain pikemen guarding this way in, so a lot of the Arthedain units are already within the town. Marksmen, 2 units of Illuminous Gate Guards, which is an interesting committal of resources, and some dismounted Knights of Illuminous there as well, and way back over here, a couple more units of Minhiriath Archers. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, this is a map that is going to be quite punishing for the attackers to get across. I think really it's going to come down to how many losses the attackers take in getting across the river, more so than anything else. If they can avoid taking catastrophic losses, then I think the sheer muscle that Angmar and Rhudaur can bring together. They synergize really, really well with one another, honestly, with the heavy-duty nature of Angmar and the damage that Rhudaur can provide. I think that it could be pretty nasty for them. Some Goblin Band revealing themselves. However, if they do take too many losses, then ultimately the quality that we could see on display from Cardolan and Arthedain should be enough to carry the day. But it is going to come down to their skirmishes, I think. Cardolan's crossbows and Arthedain's archer lineup simply offer too much in the way of strengths to ignore. There is a trebuchet here as well from Tommy Wiseau. It'll be interesting to see where he puts that. The THARBAD riders are an interesting inclusion, but without the presence of knights, they will have to watch out for those wargs should they cross the river. If the THARBAD riders get a good charge on the wargs, they can probably kill most of the unit, to be honest with you, in one fell swoop. But if they don't, then the wargs will rip them apart. It's definitely a very fine control will be needed if they want to make good on that. Snaga Stalkers crossing onto the wooden bridge. Definitely not the sort of unit you're going to waste your ranger ammunition on. The lowest quality unit that Angmar can bring. And just in behind them we can also see some Gundabad Guard, which, you know, again, decent armour, good shields on them. Another example of Angmar being a very resilient force indeed. So you can see over here, it'd be interesting to see, it looks like Angmar, some Rhudaur marksmen heading across here, but it does look as though most of Angmar's units are going to go down this choke point, which I think there's a case of too many cooks going on here. I mean, Angmar may not want to, but I think most of their army should probably be going across this bridge, to be honest with you, in support of Lalan, because that would isolate Tommy Wiseau's army across there. And yes, they will take losses going across the bridges, but ultimately I think Cardolan would buckle over here without support, whereas if all three of these armies want to take on this choke point, which at first glance seems like the easier path, less punishing for you, you're ultimately bottlenecking three of your armies into two of the enemy armies, and with the inclusion of rangers and crossbows, I think that will work against them. So it'll be interesting to see what Steward of Dale actually does with his Angmar force. Yeah, again, like there's cavalry up here in support. This could be a battle which is decided entirely on the riverbank, to be honest with you. I've seen this map in the past go up past far beyond 40k frames. Hasn't even passed the 30k threshold on this occasion, so it could be that both sides pour everything that they have into taking the river, and in the end perhaps the city itself doesn't come into it much, or this defence crumbles very, very quickly and they decide to fall back. But I find that kind of hard to believe, considering the amount of stuff that Cardolan in particular has on the front line, and the fact that you're giving up a glorious opportunity really for some crossbow and ranger volleys. Snaga archers moving forward. You can definitely force the hand of defending skirmishers with a unit like the Snaga archers. Cheap archers like this are always useful to bring in that regard, because you can waste the ammunition of the enemy very, very easily. Though of course you can't expect to get too much in the way of kills. I would suggest this Goblin Band would probably break actually if they decide to charge forward, the defenders. Still biding their time. The Snaga Stalkers inching forwards, but the bait is not being taken by Cardolan. So the Steward of Dale will have to do this the old-fashioned way, charge into melee to force them to do something at least. Rhudaur marksmen also edging their way forwards. I mean, these bridges are not an attractive proposition to cross, especially not for Rhudaur over here, because I don't know if you can see them actually, but they know that there are going to be rangers waiting on the banks of that side of the river. It's going to be an absolute dead certainty. Interestingly enough, I don't think we actually saw any rangers from Arthedain, did we? We saw peacekeepers and the like. I mean, it's not the end of the world. 2 units of rangers. We've seen rangers in the past get ungodly amounts of kills. In fact, I was watching a stream from J-Monster the other day where rangers got over 4,000 kills. It was on Amon Sul, and you can imagine what kind of map it was, to be honest with you. It was a big steep hill with only one entrance, and yeah, in terms of variety, it maybe wasn't the most thrilling battle, but just to see the massive mess that blob fight caused, and obviously the extreme kills that Rangers got, was really something. Not going to see 4,000 kills today, but with 2 units of Rangers, on a map like this, they could very easily get 1,000 apiece, which, when you consider how much of the enemy army that could be, is a substantial problem for the attackers. They need to prepare themselves really for counter skirmishing, because rangers, of course, especially the Adunaim shadow bows, or Adunaim shadow bows, I should say, are the ones that have decent armor. But pretty much any other ranger in the game that you see is not going to do too well when it comes to counter skirmish fire. The ballista, meanwhile, from Rhudaur, firing in here to the Minhiriath sharpshooters and archers, and they are going to fall back. They don't want to lose their crossbows too cheaply, too early. And here you can see the Arthedain marksmen also firing away. The Snaga were firing into this defensive position over here. They're going after the civilians. I mean, any kills you get with the Snaga archers are something, I guess, but I still wouldn't be going after the civilians. You want to be trying to bait the enemy skirmishers into using their ammo, and Cardolan will be all too happy to see the civilians be the target of any ammunition from the attackers. Close miss there. Another close miss as those ballista bolts go whizzing overhead. It does look as though now, indeed, the target of the archers down in the river has changed. Those ballista bolts, however, are still whizzing overhead. They're missing a little bit too readily for my liking. It's not really ideal positioning for them. Rhudaur swordsman now also moving forward, joining the goblin band on the front line, as well as the Rhudaur clansmen in a very dense formation there. They're just sort of biding their time, waiting, seeing if they can get some of the defending skirmishers to really open up on them. Trying to waste a bit of that ammunition. But so far, not having any luck in that regard. But Angmar still edging their way forward. The bad guard getting onto the bridge. And there's another. Looks like that one went sailing way over. All three of those bolts did. Again, like I said, not the ideal position really for his ballista. And it would be worth, I think, saving the ammunition for that, because you could probably do with trying to snipe out that trebuchet. If things sort of devolved into a really massive cluster fight down here in the river or on the bridges, that trebuchet could be utterly devastating, so you do want to be on the lookout for that. As the Snaga make their way over to this side of the river, the Minhiriath men-at-arms will very quickly deal with something like the Snaga stalkers, to be honest with you. They are actually pulling back, interestingly enough, so maybe allowing the Snaga to cross the bridge and then getting the THARBAD riders from his ally to charge them down, which of course would devastate them. 2 units, charge bonus 20. Snaga, their morale would plummet as soon as the cavalry struck them, which I think is probably the idea here. Lalan certainly not too keen to move across, but we do have the first engagements as Rhudaur and Angmar commit their first units. Snaga stalkers and goblin band going into the civilians, backed up by the Minhiriath men-at-arms. The Minhiriath units will be the things that make the difference in this fight. Rhudaur swordsmen and Rhudaur clansmen are a little bit stronger than the goblins and Snaga on the other side of things, but with the backup of these Greenway garrison footmen, pike support going to be pretty key here, and I would imagine that Cardolan isn't going to be too concerned at the moment. Pikes rolling in. Ooh, they could try and get around the side here with these THARBAD riders. It's a risky proposition to do that, because less so from the Rhudaur swordsmen, but if the clansmen get a hold of them, that morale could fall. They are going to get in here though. Guardians of Cardolan, this is an opportunity, to be fair. They've managed to get in behind. If they can get their lances down... Oh, and they don't. That's a shame. Again, the THARBAD riders are all about the charge. If you can't get a charge off, so much of their effectiveness is lost. They're not quite the all-rounders that knights are, nowhere near. But the potential is still there. Meanwhile, Dunedain Rangers from Mason, so he has brought some Dunedain Rangers and he is firing in. The Guardians of Cardolan, spread out as they are, they probably won't mind the fact that they're the targets. Rhudaur clansmen are turning around. I mean, they are shaken. The front line fight is not going too well, but I think if the attackers can finish off one of these units of THARBAD riders, which was a potential headache, they will take that from this first wave. I can see what Pimp was trying to do, but the execution was a little bit lacking. He didn't quite have the room to manoeuvre in here either, which of course when it comes to getting cavalry up to charge speed is very necessary. And you can see now their morale is starting to tank. With the proximity of spears, the hopelessness of the situation, they are going to escape by the looks of things, so it isn't a complete loss, but it isn't ideal for them either. They took a lot of losses there for not a lot of gain, it must be said. More units are arriving on the front line now as well, so now that the assault has begun, they will need to keep up the pressure. Guardians of Cardolan are also on the front line, and they are wavering actually, so considering this is a slightly stronger unit, it does go to show that Cardolan's strength on the front line is pretty good. They're going to need more reinforcements. I mean, once again the cavalry is back. I mean, I think they were trying to go after the trolls there, but again, execution a little bit lacking, and if they get caught for any length of time by the trolls, it's going to be all over for them. Meanwhile, we shift our gaze further up the river. You can see Admiral's troll hunters are moving forward, and Tommy Wiseau here, maybe he wasn't looking in the right direction, maybe he was distracted by what was happening further down the river. But those Minhiriath men-at-arms took some free hits really from the Attenmore's troll hunters, and another volley could be forthcoming as well. Indeed it is. That's going to be pretty brutal. Having said that, they are getting shot up by the crossbows that are further inland, and I don't know, trading a unit of Attenmore's troll hunters for a unit of Minhiriath men-at-arms is not really worthwhile for Rhudaur. If they were ready to take advantage of this damage with an infantry assault, maybe it would be more worthwhile, but you don't really have the luxury of trying to skirmish in that fashion on this map, I don't think, as the attackers. Because the defenders are going to be able to punish you readily for it, as Y2K has just found out. Meanwhile, another bolt coming in from the ballista. THARBAD Warhammers committed to the front line. You can see there the ballista bolt probably getting some friendly fire. They're lucky they haven't killed any of their own trolls yet, actually. There's some orc fellas in there. So some AP, nice AP with the trolls. The problem the trolls are going to have is the fact that Cardolan have done exactly the right thing here. They've immediately committed their best troll killing unit in the THARBAD Warhammers to the section of line where the trolls are at, which is going to be a problem for them. Orc fellas coming in with some additional AP. I will say, however, Dunedain Peacekeepers there, I mean, that's a lot of routing. For the attackers, they can afford for one assault at least to go bad, I think. As long as they're still doing damage to the enemy. Ooh, and again, that looked like more friendly fire than anything else. That wasn't, though. Some good hits there on the Arthedain men-at-arms. Don't really want to be committing pikes into a section of line that has trolls in it. Dunedain captains moving forward. More reinforcements are needed if they want to keep this assault going, the attackers, because it hasn't gone too well for them so far. They have done some damage to some of the lower-end Cardolan units, but now the Dunedain captains, THARBAD Warhammers, Peacekeepers from Arthedain are on the way forward as well. These are more serious units which will require a more serious response, and I don't think there's enough reinforcements on the other side of the river that are ready to move, to be honest with you. I mean, to be fair, that ballista is starting to rack up a very nice kill count for itself, getting several kills per bolt onto the Arthedain units over here, and that is enough to break one of the units of men-at-arms actually. So I mean, there is a silver lining to this. The trolls are still fighting hard as well, but you know, the Warhammers are going to be here doing their business. And the Peacekeepers' high attack score as well means they're not the worst line infantry unit to send at the trolls either. But generally speaking, you do need two-handers to take on the trolls up close and personal. Minhiriath men-at-arms are routing as well, so that ballista has yielded some good results. Meanwhile, see over here, the Attenmore's troll hunters are back, but they've been really dealt some stinging blows by those Minhiriath sharpshooters. The archers are just sort of waiting there. Rhudaur swordsmen and some Rhudaur marksmen are on the bridge. The marksmen are trying to skirmish with the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, but it's going to take a lot of time before the Rhudaur marksmen make an impression on the Hearthguard. They're very heavily armoured, and they've got those big shields on their back as well, giving them a partial shield value. They're going after the Minhiriath archers as well, who are sort of the diet version of that really, because they've got the armour, they've got the shields. They're not on the same level, of course, but they can counter skirmish now, I think. The Attenmore's troll hunters moving forward, trying to get into a position to use their javelins, but once again they're caught out really. Minhiriath men-at-arms getting into melee, and with the numbers being what they are, there's more than twice of the Minhiriath men-at-arms now, so it's going to go against them. Angmar's going to need to go forward to give them a bit of support, but it's over here where the main event still is. So some Rhudaur axemen have moved forward. They're getting shot in the back though by Arthedain marksmen up on the hill, and obviously that is the main problem with stuff like the Rhudaur axemen and the orc fellas, who have really been shot very heavily. Still the ballista getting some good hits, and now there's dismounted Fornoster Rain Knights for them to shoot at as well. The trolls have all fallen, however, unsurprisingly, considering the THARBAD Warhammers are in close attendance. The trebuchet is on the way forward. The other unit of Angmar trolls is now here as well. Again, there's a lot of shock infantry now though, a lot of heavy swordsmen, Warhammers. There's not really a fantastic place to be advancing. In come some more Rhudaur clansmen, armour upgraded this time, so they will be a little bit more resilient. That ballista though, everything else hasn't gone too well for them in this assault, to be honest with you. when it comes to the attackers so far, but that ballista is making it so that the defenders are hemorrhaging manpower on that side of their line. That, however, is the Dunedain Rangers from Pimp, who have been skirmished down as well. I mean, it's one of the things which is quite difficult to keep track of during the course of a battle. But that does show that the attackers are focusing the right things with their archers, keeping the Rangers at arm's length. Something like the sharpshooters are more difficult to do that with, however, because they are heavily armoured and shielded. Cardolan and Erebor have got crossbows that you can't really skirmish with them too easily. That was a nice hit there from the Trebuchet. In comes some Angmar halberds as well as the Blackwatch Legion and the Trolls. They could be trying to push through here, and they may very well be successful without reinforcements. You can see here the Blackwatch Legion doing their thing. Rhudaur swordsmen pushing in. With the Trolls there as well, they'll do a lot of damage to the Arthedain pikes that were brought in to help shore the line up. And they're continuing to try and shoot into the side of this area over here. Unfortunate bit of friendly fire there. Dunman Hunters taking those blows. In come the Tharbad Riders. They're trying to charge into the Trolls, and they do manage to kill off one of them that was exposed, but they need to go out and then charge in again now that a few more of them have managed to get in here. Trollshort Axe Throwers trying to do their thing. A very good unit for breaking up a defensive position like this. They'll do a ton of damage to unshielded units. The Trolls are in here, so they've taken a lot of damage so far, the attackers, but they're making some progress. Another nice hit from the ballista. More routing. The key now is the attackers need to send forward more men so they can keep this assault going. Black Wolves would be nice because they don't go down too easily in a short space of time, and they'll deal a lot of damage. In come the Tharbad Riders, but that was a pretty tame charge. There was too much clutter in the way, really, and now they need to get out of there before the Trolls cleave into them. Dunedain Peacekeepers will do quite well, though. They will outclass the Blackwatch Legion as far as a melee unit goes. Another nice hit there. It's on only Rhudaur clansmen, but it was centre mass, so a lot of them fell. Peacekeepers doing well against the Trolls as well because of their high attack. They're going to try and work up the line here, though, the defenders, as the Fornoster Rain Knights continue to move forward, but thrown axes are coming their way, as well as more ballista bolts. Angmar are now on station. They came across the bridge, but they've had the door slammed shut in their face, really, by Cardolan, but at the very least it's meaning that these forces in the northern part of the map from Tommy Wiseau cannot be committed further south, which would make their life a little bit more difficult. Guardians of Khan Doom on the way across as well. Ranged support. You'd imagine Cardolan should be good to go on to win that fight, to be honest with you. You can see over here that Rhudaur have also tried to do the same, but again, it's not exactly the biggest assault, is it? But it is something that at least Tommy Wiseau has to continue to monitor. Witch Realm Enslavers coming back over here. But yes, Cardolan should have a fairly comfortable victory here in the north. It hasn't really been too difficult for them so far up here, but the main worrying situation is, of course, a little bit further south. You can see over here the Trolls did move to sort of block reinforcements from coming down here, but they have been finished off now by the pikes, the Tharbad Riders charging into them. The main culprits there. The Dunedain Troll Slayers are going to do tons of damage, you would imagine. More units heading to the front line, more clansmen. But you have to say, actually, this assault has ultimately failed. And I do think that this is a result of their reinforcements not being close enough, not being quick enough on the draw. If you're going to commit forward the Blackwatch Legion, you need to be ready to follow them in. Still the ballista managing to do some damage. I can't imagine it's got very many bolts left. The Warg Riders are coming forward again. This would be another decent unit that they could have used earlier to make the most of the situation. The Warg Riders are intercepted, however. They're sandwiched between Troll Slayers and Tharbad Riders, who did get a charge. So I don't think these Wargs are going to last too long, especially because of those axes from the Troll Slayers. A huge amount of damage comes off of them. But that, the slow reactions from the attackers there to not commit forward units to continue the assault may prove to be the difference between victory and defeat here. The defenders caught a bit of a break there, because that assault, the first part of it was executed quite well, I thought. That was mostly Rhudaur Axemen, I think, in that blow, which was a good hit from the Trebuchet. But like I said, they did the first part well, Blackwatch Legion and Trolls making the whole, but then there was no infantry behind it to flood forwards and consolidate their gains, and in the end they lost all the ground that they gained from that. Arthedain Pikemen and Dunedain Peacekeepers shoring the line back up. The Black Wolves, who would have been another good unit to have on the front, like I said, have now arrived, but a little bit too late. further north. I mean, Angmar continuing to put pressure on over here, but again, the battle is against them. Stuff like Gundabad Guard and Guardians of Karndoom are very resilient, but when you're up against something like THARBAD Warhammers, it's going to be an uphill struggle for you. Unless you had the support of... Ooh, there's Dunedain captains squeezing onto the bridge as well, as they continue to try and hunt down some of the Angmar infantry which is on here. The Atomor's Troll Hunters would have been a good supporting tool had they not been used earlier. Witch Realm Enslavers are on the front line, which has changed the fortunes of this battle somewhat. I mean, the Minhiriath are really going to struggle against a unit like that, but having said that, they are getting shot directly in the back by the Hearthguard of Amon Sul up there, which probably isn't going to go too well for them. Rhudaur Marksman taking damage, but again, there's more units being committed across. Something for him to think about, to be honest with you. I mean, he does have support in the shape of the crossbows and so on. We'll see. He's going to take losses. I still think Cardolan will be victorious up here in the northern section of the map. Speaking of which, down here, the front line is in a bit of danger of falling completely silent, to be honest with you. You can see here the Black Bolt have been very, very quickly focused down by crossbows, archers, and held in place by pikes and peacekeepers. So it hasn't gone too well for them at all, and like I said, this assault has pretty much stalled out entirely, which is never a good sign if you're the attackers. Yeah, the ballista out of ammunition now, so the crew has been sent forward. Interesting to see what they actually have left over on this side of the river. They're continuing to send forward swordsmen, but it's a bit of a now or never type situation. I think they'd probably be better off just throwing forward everything they have at their disposal at this point and going for a bit of a Hail Mary, because they do open themselves up to a lot of damage from crossbows and rangers and the like. There are also witches there from the Steward of Dale, which of course can have the potential to turn the match on its head. But I mean, the price of them continuing to fight in the way that they have, committing forward individual sections of their army at a time, could be too much. In go the Atomor's Troll Hunters, attacking the Arthedain front line, but still the Peacekeepers are holding. They've done really well in this battle so far. Another shower of axes coming in. They should probably be targeting the pikemen, to be honest with you, because they devastate them, whereas the Peacekeepers at least do have those round shields, which will mitigate some of that damage. A little bit further up, Arthedain Men-at-Arms taking damage, some volleys from the side from those Rhudaur marksmen over on the eastern bank. Minhiriath archers are there. Sharpshooters continuing to fire, more units being committed. Rhudaur marksmen coming in to support. There's not many of the enslavers left. Well, I say that's 27 of them, and at least now they can't be shot in the back quite so readily, but the upgraded Dunedain captains are on station to shore things up, which is going to make life a little bit more awkward. The Warns of Tir Gorthad can be committed. I mean, they're on a road to nowhere here, Rhudaur, but they do need to keep this assault going because it is at least buying them time in other sections of the map. Because if all of these Cardolan units are allowed to go to the main choke point down here, it's going to be tough for them. There's still fighting going on back here apparently, which is kind of interesting. Dunedain Rangers. There is one dude here. One Gundabad Guardsman. The Rangers should be absolutely fine with that. There are still some Warg Riders, interestingly enough, so they've actually come back from routing. Dunedain Rangers from Arthedain doing the business, shooting into these clumps of savage Northmen as they continue to move forward. The hexagonal shields of the Rhudaur swordsmen moving in. Dunedain Troll Slayers, really, really effective in melee. Good target for the axe throwers though, because their armour isn't exactly fantastic. Wearing leathers and such. Good for flexibility, not so good for dealing with heavy duty attacks. Warns of Tir Gorthad have moved in now, which, yeah, that'll be enough to make sure that this Rhudaur assault ends in failure. Very, very useful tool for Cardolan, buffing the morale of nearby units, as well as the Hearthguard, so there's no danger of Cardolan's morale issues cropping up over here. Rhudaur among evil men, interestingly enough, are actually slightly better off than most when it comes to morale. Again, more trebuchet blows. Narrowly missing getting some really good shots. Arthedain marksmen being committed forward to really help shore up the line. more brave men standing in the way now. Ettenwall's troll hunters continuing to try and use those javelins, but they're not going to get the chance to do so, and they're going to be torn limb from limb really by the Dunedain troll slayers. And so far the balance of power is still very even, but of course the attackers always tend to have a bit of a natural advantage in a situation like this. There goes the Angmar general, sniped by the trebuchet as soon as the hammer guard actually arrived on the front line, interestingly enough, so that's most unfortunate for Angmar. But I do think the defenders have handled themselves pretty well thus far. Horns of Tir Gorthad moving in down here now as well, which will help keep any Cardolan units in the fight, but there actually isn't that many Cardolan units left. Most of them are spent. There's still some sharpshooters, of course, and with their maces they'll be able to add a bit of venom to the front line. But mostly it's Arthedain holding onto this river crossing at this point. Some more Cardolan units from Tommy Wiseau may arrive later after their victory here in the central crossing. Rhudaur marksmen may try and cross, but a single unit of Rhudaur marksmen isn't going to be too much of a concern for Cardolan. Speaking of which, they may be able to shift their entire army over in just a moment, because they have pretty much entirely defeated these units over here. They actually are going to leave 2 of the Witch-Realm Enslavers alive by the looks of things. And there also the Cardolan archers firing at the Dunman pikemen as they cross, which obviously is going to be really, really devastating for them. Truly one of the worst units in the game when it comes to surviving arrow fire. And that's going to be very costly for them. But he's continuing to be a thorn in Tommy's side, at least Lalan, which is better than doing nothing at all. Because they are trying, of course, to buy time so that Cardolan reinforcements don't arrive here in the south. Tommy Wiseau's THARBAD Warhammers, who took no losses really against that assault from Angmar across the middle bridge, have now arrived down here, however, so a portion of his army has arrived, unfortunately, for the attackers. Rhudaur pikemen and the Black Walls moving forward. Lalan's units as well, and I think this has been ultimately a bit of a problem for the attackers. The fact that both Angmar, who started in front of that bridge, and Lalan's Rhudaur army, who started in front of that bridge, have still been too eager to come down here and focus their attention on this one choke point. For me, at least 3/4 of their armies should have been dedicated to going across these bridges, making the map bigger. In the end they didn't do that, and I think it was because they didn't want to get shot going across these narrow positions, but as a result of that decision they've just ended up making the battlefield smaller, and they've actually made the job of the defending missiles, I think, easier in the long run. Short-term preservation of your units at the cost of the long-term result in the battle, I think, is how this is probably going to go as we enter what will probably be the final rolls of the dice for the attackers here. If they can get the Witches into a good position, that may be sufficient to turn this battle around. We shall have to wait and see. But, I mean, see back here, the Minhiriath archers have chased the enemy an awfully long way. I doubt they're going to stay fighting for too much longer. They are shaken after all, but they are getting in the way of this advance as yet more axemen come in. Rhudaur axemen and Black Walls. Ettenwall's troll hunters, what are they using their javelins on? Gate guards or Horns of Tir Gorthad would definitely not be the worst target if those were the 2 that they were going after. Rhudaur marksmen have been broken by Cardolan as they move down here. There is still some Greenway Garrison footmen and some Minhiriath men-at-arms getting in the way. There's one Witch-Realm Enslaver left, which could be enough, to be honest with you, to win this fight for them, because it's a bit of a microcosm of a fight, but the Hearthguard of Amon Sul could just come in and easily turn this fight in Cardolan's favour should it be required. Which means, of course, the rest of Tommy Wiseau's army is moving down here. The reinforcements will arrive. What's left of Cardolan's strength will be committed. Dunedain Rangers, his Dunedain Rangers are already down here, of course. They didn't really need to be used in the north. And this is what I mean. They avoided having to be shot by the Rangers by going across those bridges, but that just meant that his Rangers didn't need to be used up there and they could just be shifted down here. So all they've really done is chosen a different place for their armies to die. The 2 Rhudaur armies that started down here, of course, they've got every right to come down this choke point, but Angmar, like Steward of Dale and Lalan, I think it's highly questionable decision making here, and ultimately that may very well be costing them. dismounted Knights of Illuminus arriving now, so yet another elite unit, very tough to wear down. Having said that, Rhudaur have got enough AP to do that, but it's just another elite unit they're going to have to try and hack their way through, which they are now running out of manpower to do, I think. Where be the Witches? That's the question. Have they been committed? Don't want to get too close to the front line because I know that there is a potential issue with crashing. Of course, they could very well have already been shot to death, which if the defenders were paying attention to them, which if you're playing in a game like this, it's absolutely the sort of thing you need to be on constant alert for. Not looking promising for the Witches, is it? I can't see them anywhere. Haven't seen the streaks of foul green sorcery just yet. Minhiriath archers moving in. Minhiriath archers on that side as well, firing away. Not the most damaging missiles, but at this point it's still going to be something which is going to prove a little too costly, I think, for the attackers. A nice volley of javelin fire there into the Dunedain captains. More units arriving on the front line. It's just Minhiriath archers, but it's more men just getting in the way here, allowing more crossbow bolts and more arrows to find their marks in behind here. Certainly, Ettenwall's Troll Hunters or Blackwolds would be a worthwhile target. Probably the Blackwolds more. Well, killing off the Javelins still have ammunition, they still have a decent shot, so maybe you could say the Troll Hunters would actually be a better target, but either or I think would be sufficient. Some Hearthguard of Amon Sul from Pimp there, up there on the side. I thought that was the Witches then, but it's not, it's just routing Guardians of Cardolan. Hearthguard of Amon Sul continuing to fire. Most of those arrows going to be finding their marks as well as the rest of the Cardolan army gets down here. Still some interesting units still to go, like Arthedain Berserkers, but if it was just a case of melee, then maybe the attackers would still have what it takes, but the fact that the defenders still have, they've been able to ration, like I said, their ammunition so, not easily, but like they've been able to ration their ammunition because this was the main choke point they needed to focus on, so they just didn't use all their ammo at once, just slowly used it, and they've still managed to maintain some ammo here later into the fight. And with that support, you have to say, arrows finding their marks, hitting Blackwolds, exactly the sort of target you want to be hitting. I'm not sure whether Arthedain Berserkers, Troll Hunters and Trollshore Axe Throwers are going to have enough at this point to do the same to the defending line as the defenders are doing to the attacking line. It's possible, but unlikely. These Guardians of Cardolan just continuing to rout all over the place. Some Rhudaur Axemen are back there. There's still some Enslavers. It's not looking good for the Witches. I guess their corpses must be around here somewhere. I assume they were shot, which I'm sure will greatly please many people. And again, good choices of targets as well from the defenders, I have to say. They're going after the right units. In come the Dunedain Rangers. Defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Depleted pikes, but again at this point just getting as much manpower on the front line as you are able. I imagine would be enough to give them the win here. Some Rangers on the front line as well. Just more and more units being able to get forward in reserve. Nearly 100 Minhiriath archers helping to get in the way. Just isn't going to be enough Blackwolds, I think, to carry the day. There's still a few more units from Tommy Wiseau making their way down here as well. Very depleted units, albeit. 61 Hearthguard, 63 Hearthguard, so that's over 120 very tanky multiple HP spears. But I mean, having said that, what's going on back there? Still just Guardians of Cardolan. This is pretty much all the defenders have, and I mean the defenders, they are in a little bit of danger here of just not having quite enough damage to see them over the line, actually. In come the Rhudaur Axemen, 150 of them. And again, without missiles to shoot into them, they are actually a more dangerous unit. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers are here. They're a pretty damaging unit, to be fair to them. It's actually going to be closer than I initially thought it would be. It all just depends on whether or not the defenders have got the... I think they still do. I think the problem is, like, the attackers just need more on the front line, because you can see they're just being overwhelmed at this point. I can see that they want to use their missiles still, but they just need more. Again, there's some enslavers across the river that should have been committed far sooner, I think. There's some Arthedain Rangers revealing themselves from Lalan, which again, like, they should have been committed earlier. If they'd been up here sooner, you can just make them go back into hiding so they can't be focused down, and then you would have them on the front line ready to shoot through the ranks. As it is, by the time the enslavers and the Arthedain Rangers make it to the front line, the losses could already be just a little bit too much. More javelins coming in. I think they're trying to target Hearthguard. It is close though. I am somewhat rooting for the defenders on this occasion, because I do think that the way that they've handled themselves has been very, very good. Only 12 Tharbad Warhammers remain, but they've definitely been doing the business on the front line. The Berserkers are going to roll in, which are a dangerous unit, but there's still stuff like the Wards of Tir Gorthad that can be utilised. 8 Greenway Garrison footmen. All hands on deck for this one. Still, these Trollshaw Axeworks have got a bit of ammunition. Where did those hammers go? There they are, the enslavers. Arthedain Rangers are shooting, but do they have a good shot? This could be a game changer, to be fair, the Arthedain Rangers. They're arcing their shots and they're all over the place a little bit, which leads me to believe it's not ideal. It will still do some damage, but it might not be to the level that they need it to be. Arthedain Berserkers' victory seems certain. Bouncer Forces is evenly matched. I mean, they're going to do a lot of damage to these Minhiria. Rhudaur Rangers are still up there. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, they're trying to get rid of the Arthedain Pikemen, who have really been absolute champions on the front line, you have to say. Do the defenders have enough to hold on? They've got a lot of really nice heavy units. Hearthguard, Minotaur Roman, Gatekeepers, Wards of Tir Gorthad. It is mostly, at this point, Cardolan that remain. With this many Hearthguard of Amon Sul, though, and Wards of Tir Gorthad, routing is not really going to be an issue. It will just be their ability to deal damage, I think, which is in question. Attack or defense, which philosophy will be enough to win through, and this, I think, is pretty key. They're going to be able to overlap the flanks here, the Attenmore's Troll Hunters, and they can see that immediately, and Tommy Wiseau is going to have to try and block the way with some Hearthguard. Now would be a good time for one of the defenders to reveal some hidden units, but I don't think that is going to be the case. Nope, just a bunch of routing Arthedain units back here, and maybe the damage just wasn't quite there. I mean, we shall see. You can actually see over here that they have managed to bust through over here. So the Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers, you can see the Arthedain Rangers are trying to do their thing, but at this point they don't really have an ideal shot, because if they shoot they're going to hit their own men as well. The Witch Realm Enslavers are by far the most deadly unit in melee on the field at this point, but the Hearthguard of Amon Sul will do their best to tie them up for as long as they possibly can. There goes Pimp's General. That shouldn't be enough to make him rout though, because the only unit I think he has left is the Hearthguard. Yeah, that'll be Arthedain then. Essenmore's Troll Hunters in behind enemy lines. Arthedain Berserkers are there trying to sort of wriggle free. The Hearthguard have managed to push forward, and they will engage this unit of Attenmore's Troll Hunters. A remarkably close game this, you have to say. Arthedain Rangers in the background there, 56 of them remaining. The Arthedain Rangers are going after the Gatekeepers, which probably the best choice. There goes the Rhudaur General. Could be an issue for them. Yeah, I think this was a bit of a mistake from Tommy, to be fair, to try and chase down a unit with pikes when pikes are the main anchor to your front line. I think that's a little bit questionable, but then they don't really have that many units left to them. Arthedain Berserkers are taking damage, but so too are those Gatekeepers. They've turned their backs on the Arthedain Rangers, which might be the end of them, to be honest with you. In come the pikes. There's only 10 of them remaining, but they're rolling in here. Could that be enough to make the difference? Another vicious javelin volley, that. And this is the problem, like, these Hearthguard, they're so resilient, but they're not able to do the damage to these units quickly enough, and that is going to be a problem because this is where Rhudaur shine. Their ability to deal damage quickly, armor-piercing damage. Those Atmor's Troll Hunters could be the difference here, and I don't think at this point Cardolan are going to have what it takes to take on the Witch Realm Enslavers. I think the attackers have gotten quite fortunate here, if I'm being honest. I think the fact that they focus so heavily on this choke point could have worked against them for the reasons that I said. In the end, they've gotten away with it, but such is the way of things, and yeah, Cardolan are not going to have enough here. Rhudaur will succeed by the looks of things in their conquest of THARBAD, and the Witch King will be most pleased this day. Rhudaur will fall under his sway following this capitulation. A few routing units here and there. 4 Wardens of Tirngorthad, 30 Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers. The Hearthguard have all been vanquished. I would say that as well, composition-wise, I'm not sure that the THARBAD Riders didn't really accomplish much of anything in the end. If you're going to bring a unit like that, then it is a gamble, and it's a gamble that did not pay off. And they're cheaper than stuff like Knights and really high-end Lancers, of course, but it's not quite the same. Do they still have units left over here? Doesn't look like it. Is there a unit over here? No. What is left there? There has to be something left, surely. Units over on this side of the river? Oh, it is actually units on this side of the river. Interesting. So it is just this one unit of Hearthguard of Amon Sul. They were trying to stop the Rangers from firing, but it was too late. To be fair, one of the things I did say the defenders did quite well was ration their skirmish ammunition, but this one unit, you know, they got a few javelins, a few rangers, and that wasn't enough for the attackers, so I have to say the attackers did that as well. So fair play to them. And at this point, this is all that remains. As the Rangers continue to kite away, but I don't think there's anything else. Again, a real mess over here. A truly catastrophic body count. The population of Rhudaur has been significantly reduced this day. But very back and forth, I would say. And the attackers did pull it back late on, because for a while there I thought it was looking really quite ropey for them indeed. Hearthguard of Amon Sul coming down here. I mean, even if the Hearthguard do succeed in killing the Rangers, there's no way they're going to kill 48 Witch Realm Enslavers. So this is going to be the end of days. There goes the final Cardolan general. It was actually Tommy Wiseau's general that died earlier on. This is going to be it's going to be the end, unfortunately. And again, it was Rhudaur's javelins and axe throwers and just their overall aggressive nature which allowed them to get themselves over the line here. And fair play to the attackers. I still think that I would not recommend going so all in on one choke point as they did here, because it could so easily backfire. I think more of the unit should have been committed to those bridges further north. At least 50% of those armies, to be honest with you. Because as it was, Tommy Wiseau's army arrived and it was still reasonably healthy, and that could have been enough to give the defenders the win. It wasn't, but other than that, I think the attackers staggered their attack reasonably well. And like I said, the initial assault didn't go too well. Their attack almost completely stalled out, which could have been a pretty bad thing indeed, but they were able to keep it going. And that's the key to playing as the attackers here, so fair play to them, you have to say. As much as I was poking holes in their attack, I still think ultimately they won the battle, and they won it for some good judgment as well. It was risky, but it ended up paying off in the end, I think. As for the defenders, I did praise them for their ammunition conservation earlier on, and to be fair to them, they must have killed the witches at some point, which is definitely noted. But there were a few things, I think Pimp's composition was questionable. I think the civilians, like, there's really no point in bringing civilians if you're on the defence, because yes, they can act as a meat shield, but if you're the defenders, you need quality, especially when you're dealing with the kind of numbers that Rhudaur that a Rhudaur Angmar joint invasion can bring to the field. So I really don't see the point in bringing civilians. The THARBAD riders, always a risk to bring cavalry on the defence, especially when there is all or nothing as the THARBAD riders, and it was nothing really on this occasion, unfortunately for Pimp. They didn't really seem to get anything good done anyway, unless I missed it, but we'll be able to see that in just a second, because we will be able to see the Cardolan kill counts. And as for Arthedain, were there any Arthedain units that I would have brought? Perhaps the Wardens of the North could have been somewhat useful. But yeah, I think Arthedain, I think the Peacekeepers were a good bring. They seem to do quite a lot of damage. Have to say as well, the early kills that ballista got really did add up, because without those I think the defenders would also have won, so that was definitely a good bring by Y2K86. Let's see what did the damage for the Cardolan armies. Tommy Wiseau, Minotaur Rom and Gatekeepers doing very well. Hearthguard of Amon Sul, who managed to hold on for a long time, to be fair, considering they are an almost entirely defensive unit. Sharpshooters, of course, doing very well. 444 kills on Dunedain Rangers is a very nice return on them. The Trebuchet got some good hits. The THARBAD Warhammers did well initially, but then they ultimately ended up getting swamped by javelins. Wardens of Tir Gorthad doing quite well. So again, a lot of good performances. A lot of the Minhiriath units doing just, highly average, but you'd kind of expect that, considering when you lock blades with Rhudaur, they've got that aggressive edge to them, which the Minhiriath are kind of weak to. As for Pimp, let's have a look at the THARBAD riders. Yeah, that's not enough in terms of kills for THARBAD riders. If you're going to bring them in this situation, you need to be getting at least 100. I would say closer to 150 really, when you're considering the charge of the THARBAD riders. Considering the damage they can do, especially to squishy units, that could have made the difference, but I think he committed them too soon. Civilians, I think, were a bit of a waste. Again, wouldn't have brought them. Dunedain Rangers 339. Again, that's good enough for Rangers in a situation like this, I think. And a lot of the ranged units in general did very well. As I said at the beginning, I think this battle would have come down to the ranged units, and the defenders did a decent job at getting some kills, but in the end it wasn't quite enough to deal with the massive army that they were faced with, and Rhudaur and Angmar victorious. But a very close battle as well, a very entertaining battle, so big thank you to Tommy Wiseau for sending this one to me. As for what is next, obviously, like I said, there will be, I'm sort of trying to make the schedule of 2 pre-recorded videos a week and 2 streams a week. I think that's probably the best way to do things, certainly before university kicks into gear again, so we'll be able to do it for at least 3 weeks, and then depending on what my schedule is like, we can sort of re-evaluate things. But to be honest with you, I don't think I will need to change that. I think the only change will probably come in the new year in February, when obviously I'll have to re-evaluate how I do things as a whole, considering that's when university will probably end up finishing. But I think that will be the target moving forward. So there will be streams certainly on Wednesdays, I think, and then on either Fridays or Saturdays, depending on what day is available. And as far as videos go, a video will be released on Monday, and then another video will also be on either Friday or Saturday, depending upon again what day is better to stream. So those two are fairly interchangeable. We'll see what works best. We could hammer that out to be more regular as well, but it kind of depends there, I think. Speaking of which, the upcoming battle replay, the next one I will be doing will be a custom scenario from Silmarillion Total War that was made by Eclipse, so that will be the next pre-record that we see. As for what happened, oh, hang on a minute, I just remembered something actually. I think I need to change a couple of things around when it comes to where it pertains to Silmarillion. Sorry, because I think there's a new update which I need to do to do that scenario effectively. But yes, that will be the next Silmarillion. That'll be the next battle replay that we do in Silmarillion. Hopefully, anyway. If it turns out that the new version was not right and I've ended up deleting the version that Eclipse's scenario was on, unfortunately it will be lost to the ether. But I do believe it's the new version, so hopefully that's the case. Which is something that I have to accept with Silmarillion at the moment. There's a lot of small updates going on, a lot of updates in quick succession as they get the new version out. But hopefully that's coming to the end now, and that will cease to be an issue, because the last 2 Silmarillion update or replays I did ended up being desyncs because of the game version. Hopefully that won't be the case with Eclipse's scenario, because they're always a good time. And following on from that, there is a Siege of Dale that I was given, which could very well be the one that follows that. There are a couple of others as well. Like, I do have a couple of things in Reforged that I can do, But do remember that I'm always willing to accept more. I think certainly with 2 pre-records a week, it definitely means that I won't be suffering burnout from doing these pre-recorded videos in the same way that I was earlier on in the summer, where it was starting to get very unfun for me. But as it stands now, and it also allows me to be a little bit more choosy, I think, because the fact that I don't need quite so many to keep the ball rolling, so to speak, means that the likelihood of a low quality battle being shown significantly decreases. So yeah, big thank you to Tommy Wiseau for sending this one in once again. Big thank you to all of the players for being a part of a high quality game. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.